some things from each other as well. So last episode, we gave some of our backgrounds and talked a little bit about red meat. And Josh came to a realization. And so we're going to dig into that a little bit more this episode. Today, we're going to do what's called the bite of the day. We'll give a little bit of a tidbit of some information that we have come across recently that we think is awesome, want to share and talk about. And then we have a new segment, episode 2, new segment called the Call Out Corner, where we're going to respond to some feedback from people from last time. And then we'll dig into the meat of the episode, have an outro, and then our mindful moment. So thank you all for being here. This is a blast.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. So the realization that I had is not I mean, I studied sustainable agriculture in college, so I was introduced to a whole bunch of people who were very much of what you would call, I guess, militant vegans, of very serious vegans. We have a very I would say robust community of vegans in Kentucky. Which, you know, would surprise you a little, I guess. But yeah, I remember we have this restaurant called Alfalfa that had all vegan food. It was an amazingly delicious place. So I certainly was exposed to a lot of those things. And whenever I would talk to those people, I would be like, oh yeah, they're making a lot of sense. Like, I agree with a lot of these points. So the bite today is going to be covering some of like the sense that they were making. And I think that the bite is always a place where people, you know, if you just have a few minutes, if you just listen to the bite, then that's going to give you a whole bunch of good information and a whole bunch of stuff that's going to help you with your diet, your life, your wellness. So today's the bite, without further ado, is going to be about two things. Emory is going to talk about the environmental impact of meat. We're going to cover that pretty quickly, not go into too much detail. And I'm going to talk a little bit about two things, which is what you actually get when you eat meat. So a lot of times you hear about when people tell you, oh yeah, a vegan diet doesn't give you enough protein, or you don't get the right amino acids. You know, meat gives you amino acids, it gives you protein. That is true. Meat does give you amino acids. Meat does give you protein, as do eggs, as do a whole bunch of those things. Well, the one thing I will ask real quick, Emory, is as a vegan, do you struggle with your protein intake?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not a doctor. I'm gonna get a blood test soon, and we'll get some more accurate information on that. But my energy's good. I sleep well. I can exercise pretty well. I don't think I have a problem with
There
protein.
are vegan bodybuilders, there are vegan UFC fighters, there are vegan triathletes. I am very, I guess, nonplussed whenever I hear people say, "Oh, you just can't get protein." It's like, you can eat a peanut butter sandwich, and in that peanut butter sandwich, you get 22 grams of protein with 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. You're gonna be fine, you know.
Peanut
And
butter is
that's
excellent. Yeah, yeah, can confirm.
uh,
A
I,
staple
I
part of my diet.
so even when I was eating a lot of meat, I would still eat a lot of peanut butter. So I love peanut butter. But regardless, so one of the things I wanted to talk about was, okay, you're getting protein in meat. Is that protein necessarily healthy? Um, and then the other thing is, what else are you getting alongside of the consumption of dairy and meat products, particularly with meat, but also in dairy products as well? One of the things I wanted to talk about is trans fatty acids. This is something that is particularly serious for men because it's been linked with depression among men and depression among women, but more so among men, which I thought was rather interesting. So the link there is that the trans fatty acids essentially just cause a whole bunch of problems in your bodies, and the exact effects of that, I'm not a nutritionalist, I'm not a biologist, so I don't want to go too far into that. But and if we wanted to get into that more in another episode, that we
Yeah.
can. There's some good resources for those for some of the scientists who did that. But essentially, it's just that trans fatty acids cause cardiovascular disease, any increase in your trans fatty acids intakes increases your risk of heart disease exponentially. Heart disease being the number one killer of like everyone in the world. So for every piece of meat that you're eating, you're essentially increasing your risk of heart disease, which is like living in a home like and getting secondhand smoke every day. It's just like there it's a completely unnecessary risk. That's not to say it's not a, you know, it doesn't taste good or it doesn't have that like, you know, that make you feel full feeling. It's just saying on a scientific level,
Yeah. Yeah.
increasing this risk means that you have a higher chance of dying unnecessarily for something. The other thing I wanted to talk about was your exposure to hormones. People always talk about the benefit of eggs. Those are coming directly from chickens. They have a high amount of estrogen in them, so you are exposed to more animal hormones when you eat meat. That is not even to say the meats that come from CAFOs, which is confined animal feeding operations, which give animals growth hormones, which also give animals an egregious amount of antibiotics. Those antibiotics end up
Yep.
in the food, and those antibiotics can cause antibiotic resistance among humans. So then the other thing, which I'm just going to talk about a
Wait,
little
wait,
bit.
let me jump
Go
in
ahead.
right here. Uh, that's really interesting. I was always told this was always something that pre-vegan as well as early vegan was, you know, if you eat too much soy, eat too much, that's where you're going to get too much estrogen. But you're saying that actually eating lots of eggs and more animal proteins actually is you're going to get a lot more hormone, or you're getting a lot of hormones there.
Yeah, both of the thing with soy is that the main thing that people are worried about that is soy protein causes higher estrogen in men. That study that I read the study, it was like 2 years ago, so I don't want to try and
All right.
like drum it up from my memory. But what I remember distinctly was it was universally regarded as bad of
Yeah.
like soy causes like a higher IGF, which can cause cancer, which can cause higher your IGF rate um, is
The
one of the things
increase.
they look for with higher cancer. That's one of the things that
Okay.
causes that causes that. So it
So
was one of those things that's one of the things they worry about, and then also causing more estrogen in men, meaning that like your testosterone's not going to be so high because you ate a bunch of soy,
yeah.
and that was pretty universally regarded as bad. A lot of the vegan bodybuilders use soy protein, wheat protein, pea protein. There's a whole bunch of them,
Yep.
and they do. I have seen a bunch of videos. I haven't done my research here to say that like you shouldn't be only doing soy protein,
Yep.
but I don't think it's as big as a concern as people made it out to be.
Okay, cool. Well, that's something we can come back to later, maybe sometime in the future. That's just, sorry, a really interesting thing. I hadn't heard about that with eggs before. So cool.
Eggs expose you to estrogen. They're literally coming from a female chicken as close to the hormones as you can get.
We don't like to think about things. Our entire uh, food system. We don't like to think about where our food comes from in these direct ways. Seeing tweets recently about, oh, my daughter asked me about the animal chicken and the food chicken, and oh my God, she's about to make a horrible realization. And there's like, haha,
Ooh.
and so there's the we don't like to think about those things. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's an egg coming from a female
S-
chicken. That makes sense.
So
So
I would say this. A lot of the facts around eating meat, you talk to people about it and it's like, well, we'll talk about this later in the meat of the episode. The one thing I wanted to finish up on with the trans fatty acids in meat and the meat proteins themselves. I don't want to go too far in detail with this, but one of the things is when you're consuming plant protein versus meat protein, um, the those same proteins, just the way that your body processes them and the bioavailability, it's just proven that the plant proteins help you with your longevity in your life, and the meat proteins do not. They are
And,
always associated with a higher risk of heart disease and a whole host of other problems.
and we'll be
Um,
linking to those
yeah,
below this
yeah,
if you're on
yeah.
YouTube or
We're not just
next to it on,
bloviating.
yeah, on Spotify or iTunes.
Yeah. So if you want to give us a brief rundown of the environmental impact of meat, that I think that would be
Yeah,
helpful here.
yeah. Well, I don't want to spend too much time here. So I want to get us moving on. But while I was doing a little bit of this research for this episode, I came across some really interesting information um, regarding eating local, which is something that I'm from a small town, a smallish town. We always had local farm, local foods. And so that was always something we were trying to do to reduce our emissions. Um, and so this information is coming from World in Data from Oxford University. And so uh, livestock accounts for 77% of global farming land. While livestock takes up most of the world's agricultural land, it only produces 18% of the world's calories. Um, and so what's really interesting here is this next fact is that if I was to go red meat and dairy free, not totally meat free, but red meat and dairy free, 1 day a week, that would be the same as having a diet with 0 food miles. So if I ate everything with basically from my backyard or my neighbor's farm, my environmental impact there, if I was eating red meat and dairy, um, then would be the same as if I would just cut it out once a week. That's something I hear a lot. Oh, well, maybe we can just be more sustainable. We can switch for the environmental impact of eating meat. Um, is that, oh, we can just switch to be more sustainable and having things. And the research shows pretty clearly, and again, we'll link to this below. There's some great charts, is that if you the red meat dairy is much higher in its greenhouse gas emissions than anything else, and so transport by and large doesn't contribute to that. So that's our little bite of the day. A little bit of information about trans fatty acids, a little bit of information about the environmental impact of meat. If you have any feelings or feedback, reactions to that, please check out the links, comment below, and we'll get back to you next time in our next segment, which is the call out corner.
Best segue
So
ever.
I really like having a call out corner, call out culture, being accountable, being transparent, being open and receptive to feedback and criticism. It's the only way to grow. And it's the only way to make sure that what you're saying and doing is true and right. So in our last episode, we had a listener express some discomfort with how we talked a little bit about anxiety and routine. And we just wanted to reiterate here that we're not experts. We're having a conversation based on our own lived experiences in dealing with, in my case, anxiety, depression, and with our experiences and how we've moved beyond this and become happier and healthier. Josh?
Yeah. Well, I think the specific thing was regarding Judd Brewer's discussion of anxiety as essentially an addiction.
Mhm.
And I think that putting it in those terms and then not going into further detail about Judd Brewer's like literal clinical practice and his treatment, because he does treat people as a clinical psychologist, is really not doing Judd Brewer justice, and it's really kind of broad, too broadly stating what's going on there. So
Yep.
there's a guy by the name of David Wolf. He's another like health and wellness guy, and he's of the brand that I don't like, and one of the things that he was saying is like a crab changes its shell whenever, and it feels very uncomfortable, and he's like, that's what depression is. Depression is you feeling uncomfortable because your environment, you need to expand and grow, and that's why you're depressed. And I just really think that's terrible. I think that is a very stupid way to think about depression. And I never want to like lessen the impact of these things that people, are feeling with where
Yeah.
anxiety and depression feel very insurmountable, very difficult. And then when you have someone give a very trite and dumb analogy,
Yeah.
it can feel very harmful to you. And so I want to say I want to speak to those two things carefully. I do think that there are two extremes when thinking about mental health. Mental health is part of the wellness, and there's the horrible David Wolf side, which is depression is a sign that things need to change. That is terrible. And then there's the this is a permanent state. This defines me. Like I'm a depressed person. I'm an anxious person. This is part of the definition of who I am.
Yeah.
Those extremes, I think, both represent a problem, and like
Generally.
yeah, moving somewhere away from those, I think
Yep.
is always work with a therapist if you're struggling with those things. Always be careful, and don't listen to one thing on a blog and then just take it and run with it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I think I said this last time. I may end up saying it every episode if it's the only thing I say in every episode. I still think it'll be a productive podcast, but therapy's awesome.
yeah,
If you're thinking about it, if someone's recommended, just therapy rocks. Having someone be able to listen to you and be trained to actually respond to things is awesome. And so if you have that opportunity, if you're able to
yeah,
do that, uh, it's great. For the rest, I mean, um, some of this is definitional of depression as how we think about it and the clinical definitions. And so these are very messy topics. And when we have these conversations in a brief hour or so, we're going to miss things. And so thank you, listener, for bringing that up. We want to make sure that we're as careful as possible in discussing these things, but we are going to slip up. And so
yeah. And Jed Brewer also
ongoing
wrote an
conversation.
entire book about anxiety, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend that book. So
Yeah.
he classifies or he talks about anxiety as a bad habit loop, as a bad like an addiction loop, and like that's not to say that like that doesn't mean that's not to trivialize it. And so like go read his book,
Yeah.
go check his stuff out. And I certainly never ever ever want to trivialize any of these things. I've dealt with depression in times of my life. It is debilitating, it is difficult. you know don't 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 get stuck there. Get
Or
help
try
and
not to.
get
Yeah.
therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And our next call out corner, a little bit of feedback from last time, was again regarding one of our claims about red meat causing cancer. And we are going to discuss that a little bit more in
oh
the
so
meat of the
yeah,
episode.
the one thing I actually was going to mention this in the bite. Apologies, I actually didn't. Yeah, red meat isn't just like I'm not just like tritely saying, "Oh yeah, red meat causes cancer." The WHO classified it as a class 1 carcinogen, and processed meat as a class 1 carcinogen. Okay, we will at one point in our time, like as a human species, look back at meat companies with the same disdain that we look back on the Marlboro company and other tobacco companies that lied to people for years and years and years. And so like I'm saying that as someone who eats meat. I'm not saying that as someone who's like trying to convince you of something. I'm saying the people who are dedicating their lives to generally human like health and safety said red meat causes cancer.
Yeah.
Processed meat is a carcinogen. So
And we'll be linking to that as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
So you can find out a little bit more. Again, always encouraging you to follow information, go to sources as much as you can. Although, again, that's, the point is find trusted sources and listen and learn and grow together. So that brings us to the meat of the episode, which is that, Josh, you made a realization last episode as you were talking a little bit about meat, and we've touched on it a little bit. But what you told me in between last episode and now was that you expect to go vegetarian and possibly or probably eventually vegan with no timeline, which is understandable. I spent years actually I'm gonna be vegan one day, just after this bacon cheeseburger. And so it took finding the right people and getting to the right place. And so let's talk a little bit. Let's dig into that a little bit today. What
Oh
what
man.
what what was running through your head? What did you think about afterward when
Well,
you told me that, hey, I need to
I'll
go, I need to
start.
do this.
I'll start with this story, which was my girlfriend was like, "Oh, I want to try these veggie burgers," and I was like, "Okay." So I fried some up and I gave them to her. And she was like, "Yeah, they're really good." And I was like, "Yeah, if you cook anything in bacon grease, it's delicious." And she gave me this look like, "Why are we eating vegetarian if you're gonna cook it in bacon grease?" I was like, I'm from the South, and like this is how we cook with bacon grease. Like, why wouldn't you do that?
Habit
Um,
loops, habit
yeah.
loops, right? Routine.
So, so, like I told you, I studied sustainable agriculture in college. It was something deeply, deeply have an enormous amount of love for sustainable agriculture. I think it is the way of the future, but it is currently a lot of our market mechanisms get in the way of it.
Mhm.
So, in studying this, it's all about doing things in a more environmental and human oriented way. Like these things are better for the environment, and if like this biome is all working together and not just monocropped,
Mhm.
then we don't have to put as many inputs in, we don't have to do all these things, to make this little amount of acreage useful. A lot of the people that were in that program were vegetarians or vegan. And so I got exposed to a lot of that like ideology there. I read Peter Singer's Animal Liberation. I read another book, which I'm going to mangle the title, which is Why We. Oh no. Do you know the title of this? I'll look it
I
up.
I don't. We can look it up though.
I'll look it up
Uh,
later. It's why we wear leather, or why we pet dogs and eat pigs. Or I think there's like three things, and it's like do
oh,
do do. But I forgot the exact name. I'm sorry. I
that's
should have
okay.
linked this in the description here, or I should have linked it in our outline. I apologize. Anyhow, no. So I read a couple of books about this, and then I read something about overfishing. I think it's yeah. I'm gonna mangle the title of that as well. It's like six fishes or something.
You've read some books that gave you some valuable information and some
Yeah.
insight.
And
And
next time I'm gonna make sure to remember all the titles of these books. Um, but in any event, I read about overfishing, and the one about overfishing was a particularly well written and beautiful book. And it just lays out this like it's like this like tragedy of the commons problem with overfishing, where we're just overfishing, we're just overfishing, and it's just this intractable horrible problem that seems like it's going to have no solution given our political and kind of the incentives within the market there.
yeah.
And it sucks because you see these things and you go, okay, so this is a problem that knowing more about the problem does almost nothing to help solve it.
Mm,
And that feels really powerless and that feels really bad. And I think there was just this feeling of like, okay, I can't fix it, so I'll just eat sushi and I'll just live my life and I'll just do whatever, just and act like I never saw that information.
kick
And
the can
yet,
down the road.
yeah, and so skip a couple years later, skip a couple months ago, and it was like maybe 6 months ago. I was smoking. I was smoking cigarettes, and I used to chew tobacco growing up in Kentucky. There's a lot of people would chew tobacco, and then I was like, this is gonna give me cancer. This is gonna give me mouth cancer. Mouth cancer is terrible. I don't want mouth cancer. So I was like, I'm not gonna chew tobacco. But then I would start. I would smoke whenever I would get like too stressed about my life, and I would use it as this like kind of crutch. Like whenever I would just have too much stress, I would just smoke cigarettes, and I enjoyed smoking cigarettes. And then like one day I'm just sitting there smoking and I'm like, this is killing me. Like this is literally going to kill me. I don't need to do it. And so I was like, I need to stop. And then that kicked off a process of like 3 weeks of on and off again. And then finally finding Judd Brewer and finding this like mindfulness stuff and like this approach. And that helped with like aligning myself and like understanding myself to where when I'm doing something that I know is bad for me, I just use
Mhm.
curiosity and kindness to kind of explore that loop of like why this is happening. And then, we were talking about eating meat, and it was just like I just kind of had that same feeling like
Deja
I'm
vu.
holding yeah, like I'm holding a cigarette and I'm like, I just do this because okay, I don't have a reason. Like, like
Yeah.
oh yeah, I know better, you
Yeah.
know.
You're in the loop.
Um and I remember one of my friends was talking to me about Brian. Brian was
Yep.
talking to me about vegetarianism, and he's been a vegan. He's a vegetarian now. And his the way that he was thinking about this was just that it was very he takes a very like Peter Singer approach that animals have a central nervous system, that they feel pain, that they have emotions, that they are like us in oh so many ways. So how do
Yep.
you justify eating them?
Yep.
And the philosophical arguments behind justifying killing animals is because we can. And that is that is a position that lacks compassion. Compassion is something that when I live my life without compassion, I become depressed. I am not happy. I My life lacks a huge element that makes it better. And that was something growing up that I was like, I was not very compassionate to myself. I was not very compassionate to people around me. And then when I
Yeah.
started to, you know, allow that very necessary human emotion to play a role in my life, it was something that made me a much better and more loving and more kind person.
Yeah.
And um I think it's also something that if you just take a few minutes to like in a meditation to just think, what is compassion? How do I be compassionate? What does this mean to have compassion for other people? And then what does it mean to have compassion for animals? It's just like such a natural step to be like, oh, I probably shouldn't like kill them and eat them.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
So, so in this sort of vocabulary that we're building of routine and habit building and breaking loops, um, how are you going to break the habit of eating meat and try to live your life with more compassion? What
so
steps are you going to take?
So you remember? Do you remember the four from Judd Brewer's? There's willpower was the first one, which is the weakest one, which he
Yeah.
calls the weakest one. Not to say that everyone doesn't have willpower. That's just to say that he thinks it is. There's substitution, which is substitution would be the one that I think is has the we can talk about that in a little bit of detail later. But substituting
Willpower,
meat
substitution.
products, yeah, substituting meat products I think is a really interesting topic, just broadly speaking. But the third one is like structuring your environment,
Mhm.
like if you structure your environment for what you're trying to do to accomplish your goal,
Yep.
i.e. your fridge isn't full of a whole bunch of meat that's going to go bad if you don't cook it.
Yep.
Don't buy meat if you don't want to eat meat.
Yep.
And then the fourth one is mindfulness.
Yep.
So my plan, which I have been enacting, was to do the first was doing the first three and being more mindful about
Was or
the
is?
is. But the structure one, I've been structuring my house to not have meat in it, but that meant all the stuff in my freezer. I was like, I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to eat this because I don't
Yeah.
waste it.
Yeah.
But but
That
now But this was I literally ate the last there was a beef flank and I ate the last one and it was like a day and a half ago. And then today I had fish for lunch and then I had lentils and rice and sweet potato and yeah. So I had a vegetarian dinner. So
Good for you.
or
One bite
vegan.
at
I
a
think
time.
it was
Yeah,
even a vegan dinner. I'm not sure though. I didn't
got to start somewhere.
well, I didn't pay attention to what the ingredients were. If all of them were vegan or not, because there's
Mm,
still a whole bunch of honey in my house, which apparently isn't vegan, but
no.
I don't want to I don't want to I don't want to go too much into detail on that. But yeah, I would say that well, this is one of our this is something I definitely think I want to talk about. Bad justifications make for bad allies. And I have known people who were vegans who stopped being vegan very like as soon as their like little friend group of vegans like fizzled out, you know,
Mhm,
where it was like they were responding to peer pressure, so they became vegans, you
mhm.
know. And I wanted to kind of talk to you about that, which was like, where was the core motivation for you coming from to be vegan? Because it's quite a big change in your eating habits, quite a big change in your lifestyle.
It's a very big change in your eating habits. For me, it was not a big change at all in my lifestyle. And actually, uh, only a big change in my eating habits because I changed what I ate. I still went to by and large the same restaurants. With some exceptions, there are places that are still ridiculously hard to find a vegan option out of what they have because it's just everything is smothered with cheese or meat. And these are places that several years ago I would have been like, yeah, this is my restaurant. I love it. Um,
Home
and
plate.
yeah, and I mean, Home Plate has a veggie burger.
Oh,
Places
good.
are moving in the right direction. But by and large, lifestyle change almost none at all. And then, but I mean, so the it's ways that we have willpower, we have structure, we have or willpower, substitution, structure, and mindfulness. And I've been doing mindfulness, meditating every day for about 6 or more years now. So I had that going for me. And then I've been building structure sort of regularly on my own with my sort of mindfulness practice, starting to um, build better habits in my life. So I was starting to build structure with that, but then also externally, I had a friend who him and his girlfriend were vegan, and so I said to, like I said, for years I'd been saying I'm going to be vegan one day. I know I need to do it, but I didn't have willpower, number one, and so I sort of worked backwards, mindfulness, structure, and then I had told that friend I was like, hey, every time we're out, peer pressure me, make sure that I do what I say I'm going to do, and
So that
then
accountability was really helpful then.
it was really helpful. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, why this is really good, why I was so excited to have you sort of caught on air with that realization last time, was that we get this accountability. We have sort of a public discussion, a statement of values. And this is really important for goal setting is to set a reasonable goal, but then also to make it known so that you can be held accountable by the people that you care about and care about you. And then so then I started to substitute. I spent one day or like one meal or two, I think, vegetarian. I went to a restaurant, ordered a pizza, and substituted the meat and ate the cheese because I was like, I'm never going to be able to give up cheese. I love it so much. And then I thought about what did you call them? High impact, what are factory farms?
CAFOs,
Um,
confined
CAFO.
animal feeding operations.
Yeah, that's double speak. Factory farms.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was like, dairy farming is terrible. I'm half-assing this. I just need to commit. And so immediately the next day I was like, I'm gonna go vegan. And I found out that it was not actually as hard to have that willpower in most of my decisions of sitting down at the menu and looking at it and make there's a meat option and there's a veggie option. I want the veggie option and just no cheese. And so I was able to maintain it. And that last little bit, I think, sort of similar to you, is you talking about living your life with compassion. There's a terrible TV show called Borgia. Not not one I recommend, but there's a character. He's this angry young man, and he gets in a fight and does something, and he's like, "There's a man and his values, and they ought to be the same." That's the only thing I remember from the whole show, and I stopped after like 5 episodes or something. But it's always
I never
stuck
saw
with
any
me.
of
It's
it,
like
but it's a good quote.
I have these things that I say I believe in, environmentalism and science, and the science is clear, and the environment is impacted, and similar to Peter Singer, like as Peter Singer says, our animals have feelings. We love our dogs. We look at them like they're our household pets, but then we're very capable of separating out. Oh, that's not a pet. That's a pig. And we're going to kill it and eat it, and that's fine. And so I had these values, and they were misaligned with my actions. And so once I finally had that sort of ability to provide that structure and substitution, uh, substitution here being the industry is changing more and more. Substitutes, plant-based proteins, plant-based milks, plant-based cheeses are being available and at cost here in China, all over the world. And so there's a lot of options and availability
Yeah,
for all of that.
and I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of people out there who just,
Excuse me.
you know, well, why do you eat meat? Well, it's bad to eat meat. You know, I agree it's environmentally better, but it's just it tastes good. And I think we've definitely gotten to the point now where, you and I can go and have a salad and we can both say definitively, I can eat this and not miss meat. I can or not even I'm thinking of that salad we got at QMX. That one was
That's the
amazing.
that's the only salad I eat. I almost never eat salads. I have maintained that from my
Yeah.
vegan lifestyle. I almost never eat salads. I eat all vegetables or plants, but I almost never eat salads.
I eat a lot of salad even when I'm eating meat or when I was eating meat. So the other thing too is beyond burgers, burgers are amazing. Burger King's burger is amazing. It literally became a meme. Okay, this tastes more like a burger than a burger. And it's I think as far as like meat substitutions go, only the most hardcore people, like the hardcore meat eaters, are going to be like, I just miss the feeling of a steak. Um, and
And
if that's you, what I want to say is that's okay. Go meatless Mondays for a while. Go meatless Mondays and Wednesdays. Move into it. Or if you just want to do meatless Mondays, that's fine. But do
or
realize,
or just one meal, or just one
yeah,
bite.
or just one, yeah.
Just
You
starting
know,
somewhere, and
the other thing too, just realize is that the less meat you're eating, it's not just the environmental impact, it's not just cruelty to animals or harm to animals or less compassion to animals. It's also yourself. Like plant-based protein helps you live a longer life.
Mhm.
And that is something that it's been tough for me at times in my life to be kind to myself. And that has a lot to do with like loops of like self-hatred, depression, anger. If you're angry, you're just like, I just feel angry, like my life isn't okay. Like, and you're not being kind to other people, then like, of course, you're gonna look for comfort in food. You're gonna look for comfort in like drinking too much, eating too much, doing drugs, doing other things that are going to be harmful for your life. And finding a way to just start being more kind and more compassionate. I think it eventually leads you to this place where you go, okay, I have to align myself with this value of compassion. But just starting is like the first step is, you know,
Yep.
not judging yourself too hard and, not taking yourself too seriously. And this was something I really love. Do you know the comedian Pete Holmes?
No, I think you might have mentioned him before, but no, I don't know Pete Holmes.
Pete Holmes. He's got a show called Crashing on HBO. This isn't a plug for Pete Holmes. But I love Pete Holmes. He's a vegan. And he used to be a Christian. He was raised a Christian, similar to me. And then he became a comedian. He was still a Christian. Then his wife divorced him, and he just was like, I don't know what I am anymore. And he went on this like search for truth, and where it led him was to meditation, to a little bit more new agey than I am, but he's definitely somebody who like, he has this like attitude towards life, which is like there's a whole bunch of men out there, and in trying to be manly, they're just trying to show you, oh, I can drink so much and I can't die. I can hold fire in my hands and smoke and not die. I can do all these drugs and not die. Like that's what defines me as a man. And I love that observation because I've lived it. I've been that. Like
Yeah, yeah,
um and
guilty.
hopefully later in the show we can have like we can interview women and lady guests, and so that maybe they can tell us a little bit about that. But like that masculinity side, that expression is toxic. It is awful. And he's a vegan now, and he's talked about it in detail a lot on his podcast, which is something I tune into every once and again. But one of the things he talked about with one of his guests was he posted a picture of him drinking and eating a hamburger, like after he had gone vegan. And he was like, you put 4 beers in me and then I'm eating a hamburger. And a lot of people in the vegan community were upset about it. It wasn't like a huge like let's cancel Pete Holmes about it. It was just kind of like, hey, like what are you doing? And he was like, well, I'm trying to be authentic. Like 99% of the time am vegan. I live my life by these values, but I'm a human and I make mistakes, and I want to normalize being able to be like, oh yeah, this was an
Yeah,
exception, you know.
yeah.
And that's something that, like I love that about Pete Holmes, and I try to apply the same principle to my life as much as I can. So,
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. First, because, like you said, be human, be kind to yourself. We're gonna make mistakes. Whatever goals you set, whatever ideals you have to say, hey, this is what I am, who I want to be, we're gonna stumble along the way, and that's natural, and we have to embrace that, and with some humor and some accountability from the people around us is good to make sure that we continue on and keep going. But we're gonna make mistakes. That's natural. It happens. And then also that
yeah, that this was something that also didn't change. Pete Holmes is still a huge advocate for veganism. So,
yeah, and the vast majority of the world is flexitarian. They're eating meat, but they're eating less meat consciously. And the vast majority of people, I think, will end up vegan sort of unconsciously when the whole food system sort of shifts as the economies of scale shift up, and they find that, hey, this tastes great and I'm going to eat this. My favorite brand. Oh, that's vegan. It tastes like meat. Yeah, sure, I'm going to eat this. And then you look up one day and you find out that everything on your table is vegan, and you don't have to even do the hard stuff. But uh, for some of us that are a little bit more conflicted or more active, and we have to do it, we're going to make mistakes, and that's totally fine. We just have to pick ourselves back up and put the hamburgers back down and keep going, one bite at
yeah,
a time.
I my my family is very evangelical Christian. My parents are. And I hammered my brothers and sisters on like when I was kind of getting away from religion, and they kind of followed me out except for my sister. um and I don't know why exactly I have that. Like it was a very like, it's evangelical Christians are kind of a little bit of a cult if people aren't familiar with it. It's a very like all encompassing form of Christianity. It's not like a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm a Christian, I celebrate Christmas and Easter, and go to church 2 or 3 times a year, and that's it. And evangelicalism is like your Sunday, your Wednesday, and it's a very prayerful, it's a very like Bible study type of thing, and you really have to like stay active. And I think the thing that got me there was, um I had read this book by Stephen King about writing, and it was like your character, when you're writing a character, your character should always speak the way your character should speak. So like if your character is someone who's going to use cuss words, they shouldn't say gosh darn it. They need to say it. But if like you're talking about your Aunt May who's got, years of social inhibitions, then like she's gonna say, gosh darn it, and that's okay. But Stephen King also wrote a little piece of advice that's similar to your Borgia quote, which is, you have to tell your truth to yourself first, and then your characters can be authentic. And I think he said something
Mhm.
along the lines of, in that book, it's called On Writing,
Yep.
which
Great
was
book.
yeah, which was essentially, if you're not authentic, your writing won't be authentic. And that, as a teenager, I think that really was impactful, or maybe might have been in my early 20s when I read it. But it was what started to be like, okay, if I find an inconsistency in something, and it's part of my life philosophy, or it's part of like who I am, and I'm not able to be honest with myself about it, then I have to change. And
Mhm.
that eventually led me completely out of religion. And that, in a way that was like an authentically out of religion, because I think I mentioned to you that like, I told people I stopped believing God when I was like 16, 17, and then I actually went back to church
Mhm.
and became a Christian, again. And that's a long story, but the short of it is that like, you're like, telling your truth to yourself is kind of where you start, which is like one of the things we keep saying in this is, we're changing the world by changing ourselves. Like, you have to start with yourself, you have to align yourself to these values. Otherwise it just doesn't work.
Yep.
um
It's not sustainable.
yeah,
You can't keep it up over the long term, and it'll fail
yeah,
and be reinforced in that loop.
yeah. And so that was something that, like, while we were talking about this, I just was like, oh wow, like, I've had this set of values that I've always just been living with, just this buzz, just this like buzz, like just this like noise. And then when I was like, oh, I need to change this, it's felt a lot better. So my plan is to make a pretty robust meal plan, to get all my like to get all the shopping and everything together. So I made a Notion sheet for it, and I put
Ooh.
everything together. So, and then the one thing I was like is like, I need like a staple food that I can always rely on. So I got rice and lentils, because like I can make like 20 different curries with lentils, and I have a pressure cooker, and so it takes like 30 minutes to make rice and lentils. And yeah, so that's been the plan. And then also, doing a bunch of research where, there's a guy who wrote a cookbook. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget his name too. Okay, I know the name of his book though, which is Animal Vegetable Junk. Um, because I've been literally reading it. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. He's an amazing writer. But I forgot the name of his vegetarian cookbook. I've been reading his vegetarian cookbook, and going through that. So my plan is just, to systematically approach it. I I'm not trying to treat meat as a addiction per se. Like, I'm not trying to like approach it with that level of seriousness. Like, it's kind of similar to me with like smoking, because like no one ever gave me a sobriety chip for quitting smoking, like, like, it wasn't that serious of an addiction, even though the health consequences are extremely serious. um it's just something that like I'm trying to substitute all the meals in where I was eating meat as like, here's the three sides. I need to plan the dishes around the vegetables rather than, well, what do I substitute for meat here?
Yep.
It's a new approach. So that's what I'm doing, and I would say I spent the last week working on that. So I would say this week would be the week of implementation, where the last week was the week of structure. The last week was structure, and then this week would be the week of implementation.
Cool. Well, I'm really proud of you. I'm excited to see where this goes. Uh, I hope to I'll obviously ask you more about this in our next episode, and we'll continue to share this journey with our listeners, and we'll keep growing together, changing the world by changing ourselves one bite at a time. And so I think that brings us to a good conclusion for this episode. We've got some great stuff to talk about. We covered a lot of the health impacts of meat, the environmental impacts, um, your realization, and where you're going from there and how you're going to go about it. We have our call out corner. Again, anything we said strikes you or we misspoke or something, please reach out to us, comment below, message us personally. We're all growing together. Um, and so thank you so much. If you have extra 5 minutes, stay with us for the mindful moment. If not, thank you, and we'll see you next time. So last time for our mindful minute or mindful moment, mindful 5 minutes. For our mindful moment, I introduced the concepts of see, hear, and feel from Shinzen Young's unified mindfulness. Um, I just want to give a real quick sort of definition of what he defines of mindfulness from Shinzen Young. He says, concentration power, sensory clarity, and equanimity working together. And another version of that was just being aware of what you're doing. So as we're mindful, as we're sitting in today's mindful moment, we'll be using concentration, in this case, to focus on what we see, both internally and externally, and we'll apply sensory clarity. That's the light that hits our eyes or the synapses in our brain creating images in our brain. And then if we get to a point where we get caught up in things or we can't control them, applying a sense of equanimity to ourselves, that compassion we talked about earlier. So without further ado, if you're walking, if you're listening in motion, feel free to do this with your eyes open, but be aware of your posture. If not, close your eyes and settle into a posture that you can hold for a couple minutes. I'm going to set a timer this time. And just focusing on what we see. Again, if your eyes are open, that's what you can see externally, or if your eyes are closed, maybe it's the light, little flashes or sparkles, or it's the image of something you're remembering or looking forward to. And as you recognize that you're seeing something, just note it and say, see, and then just return to your breath. And if you find yourself getting caught up in what your thoughts are, what you hear, what you feel, try to just recognize when you're seeing things and just practice. This is applying that clarity and concentration, choosing to focus on, oh, see, noting it, and then returning to your breath. And remember that C is both internal or external. Whether it's the physical light that's hitting your eyelids or flashes, sparkles, that's C. But it can also be the images as you're remembering something from before, what you had for breakfast, or a beautiful sunset, something scary. This is also C. And just note it and return to your breath. It's perfectly natural to get carried away in your thoughts, start thinking about that pain in your shoulder or that itch or what you're going to say to your boss tomorrow. As you recognize a visual that accompanies any of that, just note it as C. Separate yourself from it and return to your breath. And that's 5 minutes of a mindful moment. Thank you so much for joining us and spending a little bit of time practicing compassion and building that mindfulness skill that will help you as you change yourself in ways that you want to set up the habits that you want, not that you have to change or need to change, but they give you the ability to change if you would like to, if you feel you need to align your values and yourself the way that Josh and I have, starting to build that skill set. And of course, if you have a mindfulness practice already of some sort, that's great. Continue to do so. This is just the vocabulary and structure that I've found to be very helpful. So thank you so much for joining us. That's one bite at a time. I'm Emory.
And I'm Josh. Thank you guys for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye. All right.